In the 1800s, slavery and counting the colored out was still a big issue. Henry Highland Garnet, an escaped slave, spoke, "Some people of color say that they have no home, no country. I am not among that number. America is my home, my country." During this time period, African Americans were beginning to lose hope. They were beginning to lose hope about not getting full equality. Garnet was one of the many, both black and white, to speak out against slavery in the 1800s. A lot of people, including Garnet, loved America, but wanted to make it better for everyone. They thought that ending slavery was the only thing that could truly make things better. When Andrew Jackson was elected in 1828, it made a big change for everyone. More people could vote and take part in government, yet democracy was still far from complete. An English visitor said, "You will see Americans, with one hand hoisting the cap of liberty, and the other flogging their slaves." In the early 1800s, religious groups started to speak out against slavery. A very powerful movement known as the Second Great Awakening went through the nation. Charles Grandison Finney, one of the leaders, requested that the faithful give up sin and walk with God. He later told his followers, "Let Christians of all denominations meekly but firmly come forth and wash their hands of this thing. Let them give forth and write on the head and front of this great evil sin." These words touched the hearts of many, and finally by 1804, all the states from Pennsylvania north had promised to free all of their slaves. In 1817, the American Colonization Society proposed to end slavery by setting up a place in Africa for freed slaves. Many white Southerners supported the movement, and they were pleased that it promised to pay slave owners that freed their slaves. Some African Americans, such as Paul Cuffe, thought that they should go to Africa because they thought they would never have fair rights in the U.S. On the other hand, many African Americans were against the colonization because they wanted to stay in the U.S. Almost all of the African Americans were born in the U.S., and it was their homeland. Altogether, only a few thousand African Americans stayed in Liberia. Supporters of the colonization did not attack slavery, but another group of Americans did. They were known as abolitionists. They wanted very bad to end slavery in the U.S. African Americans played a huge role in the abolitionist movement. In the 1820s, two men named Samuel Cornish and John Rusworm put together an anti-slavery newspaper called Freedom's Journal. They had hoped to turn people's opinions around by writing about the brutal treatment of the African Americans. The best-known African American abolitionist was known as Frederick Douglass. As a child, he taught himself to read by digging through the filthy gutter to find old newspapers. In 1838, Douglass escaped and later found himself in Boston at an anti-slavery meeting. While he was there, he felt a strong urge to speak. When he rose to his feet, he talked about the sorrows about slavery and what it meant to be free. The audience was brought to tears. Pretty soon after that, Douglass was traveling around the U.S. and Britain giving out lectures that were against slavery. He then later published an anti-slavery newspaper called North Star. The best-known white abolitionist was a man named William Lloyd Garrison. In 1831, he published a newspaper called Liberator. He claimed that slavery was evil and wrong and that it should end immediately. 12 months after starting his paper, Garrison founded the New England Anti-Slavery Society. Members included Theodore Weld and a minister connected to Charles Grandison Finney. Women also played a role in the abolitionist movement. Daughters of a wealthy slaveholder named Sarah and Angelina Grimke were part of this movement. They hated slavery and moved from North Carolina to Philadelphia to work for abolition. Their speeches were about evil slavery, drew very large crowds. Some people objected women speaking out in the open, but the Grimke sisters fought for their right to do so. Many abolitionists pursued their goals through the press and public debate. Some risked prison and sometimes even death by helping slaves escape. These brave men and women formed an underground railroad. Whites and freed blacks served as conductors that helped guide the runaway slaves. One daring conductor named Harriet Tubman was an escaped slave herself. Slave owners offered a $40,000 reward for her capture. She had conducted more than 3,300 slaves to freedom, including her aged parents. Abolitionists made many enemies. Northern workers heavily opposed abolitionists. Henry Highland Garnet condemned people that thought slavery was wrong. In New York and other cities, mobs broke anti-slavery meetings and attacked the homes of abolitionists. The anti-slavery movement struggled to gain foothold in the South. Southerners believed that slavery was essential to the economy. They said that the North was trying to destroy their way of life.